So you spend hours reading a book, you understood most of it while reading, but when you try to actually recall that information, you seem to have forgotten most of what you read. Well, it's not because you have a bad memory, it's because you're not reading in a way that helps you to retain a lot more information. Now, I do used to struggle with this back then, but after watching too many videos on the topic from YouTubers to authors and implementing these tips and tricks that they have mentioned in the videos, I was able to simplify what worked for me into 3 simple steps. And these simple steps have allowed me to retain like large amounts of what I read, and I'm also able to explain what I've read in conversations and even in videos, and I have also been able to implement a lot of what I read into my life. So in today's video, I'll be sharing with you these 3 simple steps, but before that, first of all, we need to understand why we are not able to retain a lot of what we read. What are the mistakes that we are doing? Now, one of the main mistakes that we do that leads us to not be able to remember a lot of what we read is that we read books passively. We just read through the words, flip through the pages, occasionally drifting into random thoughts and imaginations, and when we are done with the reading session for the day, we just close the book, and after that we just get this fake sense of accomplishment. And the reason that I call it a fake sense of accomplishment is because we are not really gaining anything from it, right? We are not gaining from our reading session. We forget a lot of what we read, and we are not really implementing anything into our life. So we are just reading a bunch of words and wasting our time. So instead of passively reading through the words, what you should be doing is you should be doing something called active reading. And I will explain what active reading is, why that works, and how you can do that in step number 2. But before that, first of all, let's get on to step number 1. The first step starts even before you read, and this allows you to be more focused when you're reading. It keeps you motivated and you actually enjoy what you read, and that's by first of all having a clear reason or a purpose when you're reading. Now, when you have a clear reason or a purpose when you're reading, your brain will be actively searching for answers, and it will be making connections with the existing knowledge that you have, so you're far more likely to remember things. But when you don't have a clear reason or a purpose, you are far more likely to have a scattered attention, and you just drift into random thoughts and imaginations. So first of all, you need to have a clear reason or a purpose. Now, there can be many reasons for reading a book. 2 of the main ones can be, first of all, you might be facing a problem in your life. So when you're facing a problem, when you read a book related to that, while you're reading, your brain will be actively searching for the answers to solve that problem. So you'll be more focused and engaged when you're reading. And the other thing is that you can also read a book about a topic that you're genuinely interested in. So when you're reading through that, when you read about something that you genuinely love and enjoy, you are emotionally attached with that, right? So when you are emotionally attached with something, you learn a lot more faster and you retain a lot more information of what you read. So first of all, have a clear reason or a purpose before reading the book. When you passively read through words, you're not allowing your brain to deeply process that information. So instead of passive reading, what you should be doing is active reading. When you actively read, you are more focused, you're more engaged, you also strengthen the memory pathways in your brain. And to actively read a book, you should be interacting with the book. And by interacting, I don't mean that you start talking to a book alone in your room like a madman, but instead, here are some ways to actively interact with your book. Number 1, take notes of parts that you resonate with or parts that you think are important. And when you're taking notes, one of the mistakes that I used to do back then was to copy paste exactly word to word what the author wrote. Now, the problem with this is that you're not allowing your brain to deeply process that information. You're just copy pasting it. So instead, what you should be doing is to first of all understand what the author has written, and afterwards write it down with your own words. When you write something down with your own words, you're letting your brain deeply process that information. And even the act of writing down things is known to strengthen the memory pathways in your brain. Now, another note-taking tip is to write things down while you're reading. And the reason that we should be doing that is because most of the time we get these really good thoughts while we are reading. We get these really good ideas. The problem is that we tend to push it towards later on, right? We don't want to be disturbed while we are reading. But the problem is we tend to forget these things. For example, we might say, you know what, I'm going to write these things down after I'm done with the chapter. But when you're done with the chapter, you're more likely to have forgotten those great ideas, right? So make sure that you write those things down while you're reading. Now, the next thing is to not be afraid to mark and write things down on your books. Even some of the best authors consider the act of writing things down and interacting with their books as a sign of respect. So don't be afraid to write down ideas some of the personal experiences that you have. Try to make connections with them, and also write down different ways of how you can implement these things, or even the feelings and thoughts that you have while reading the book. Now, another thing is that you don't have to fully agree with whatever the author is saying. If there's something that you disagree with, write that down in the margins. First of all, mark that down, like underline it or highlight it, and then you can write down in the margins on why you disagree with that. Imagine the act of interacting with the book as if you're having a conversation with the author. Now, another thing that will help you to remember information is by recalling that information. For example, when you're done with reading for the day, you can write down like a small note on the key takeaways that you got, and afterwards what you can do is to recall that later on in the day, or maybe before you go to sleep, or it could also be when you wake up the next day. It can also be when you sit down to read the next day as well. And the other thing is that once you are done with reading the whole book, try to write down a one-page summary of the book. And once you're done with all those things, once you're done with the book notes and the summaries, you can collect that information and store it in a place like Notion. Now, while interacting with the book and recalling the information can be really good ways to remember things, there's actually something that will help you to remember things far better, and it can also help you to improve your life. And that's by actually doing the things while learning. To do this, first of all, convert those lessons into actionable steps, and then create a daily schedule consisting of those actions. So when you do those things every single day, you'll be moving the needle towards your goals. The next thing that you need to remember is that not everything will go smoothly. There's going to be different obstacles in your path. There's going to be mistakes and failures. So have something like a notebook where you can reflect on these things and you can track your progress. You'll also be able to figure out what are the areas you're missing out and how you can actually improve them. So learn from your mistakes and failures, overcome your obstacles, and keep on experimenting and figuring out what actually works for you. Now, if you want to use those things that you learn from the book in order to become a unique, irreplaceable, and AI-proof individual, make sure to go ahead and check out this video where I explain you how to become a modern-day Renaissance man.